I just want to follow up. Do you care about the price of Bitcoin?
Right now, I'm actually happy with how things are going because we had this massive price spike, right? But when you're building core technology and infrastructure like we are, I kind of want things to calm down a bit. Big price spikes aren't good for us technical folks that are developing. So I want things to be calm. We're in the early days of Bitcoin. We are not in the 2018 or even close. We're in the mid-90s. We need the time to build out Lightning and other elements of the infrastructure. And then we'll see what happens. I mean, I believe in this long term, but this is a marathon, it's not a sprint. I think people wanted it to be a sprint, but it's going to take time.
And all these ICOs, just like a distraction?
There is no Lightning ICO.
Yeah.
All right.
No Lightning. So people ask, what is the coin of Lightning? And I joke and I say Satoshis, because Satoshi is the lowest denomination of Bitcoin. So if you're excited about Lightning, you can buy some Bitcoin.
So you would not do an ICO?
We are very public about we have a joke one, but no, there's no real ICO. So we're public about that. I've been an ICO skeptic as well on Twitter. I have a lot of tweets around that. But yeah, I mean, I think we're building for these core cryptocurrency protocols. And any Lightning transaction is going to be a Bitcoin transaction. If it's on Litecoin, it'll be a Litecoin transaction.
So great to have you here. I hope that we'll get more when you have your own conference, and we'll get to cover that. And this is going to be something that we watch evolve.
It's great to be here. Thanks so much for having me.
Elizabeth Stark, Lightning Labs. Thanks so much. Jan Roberts, great to have you in.
Cryptocurrency is here to stay. Are you ready for the future? The Yahoo Finance app. Enhanced coverage for the crypto curious. Crypto Decrypted. Download now.
Bitcoin, as we know, was the first cryptocurrency in 2008. It's the granddaddy of all the coins, and it's still seen as the de facto top cryptocurrency. It has the #1 market cap. But on days when the whole market has been flying, other coins have grown by leaps and bounds and have come close to the market cap of Bitcoin. Like Ether, the token of Ethereum, that's ETH, has had its market cap grow by leaps and bounds. Ether is usually the #2 coin by market cap most days. Ripple, XRP, that has grown like crazy, and a couple times now on some days, Ripple has surpassed Ether as the #2 coin. And then Bitcoin Cash, BCH, some people believe that eventually Bitcoin Cash can overtake Bitcoin. So just because Bitcoin was first doesn't mean it will always be the biggest.
It's quite possible that another cryptocurrency will overtake Bitcoin in terms of total market value. We're seeing Ethereum, Litecoin, Ripple, even Bitcoin Cash rise in value. So yes, someday we might have another cryptocurrency that's taken the lead from Bitcoin.
And just to also want to touch on cryptocurrencies, I know that you've had some negative feelings about them, and but now Wall Street institutions seem to be dipping their toes in, and I wonder, A, if you change your mind at all, and B, one of the biggest mysteries in America, what did you tell Katy Perry about cryptocurrencies?
That's between me and Katy.
I guess so, because it said that you guys talked about cryptocurrencies, but none of us know what you guys said. That's just between you two?
We did.
Okay.
But I will answer your question about it. But there's two kinds of items that people buy and think they're investing. One really is investing and the other isn't. If you buy something, a farm, an apartment house, or an interest in a business, and look to the asset itself to determine whether you've done something, what the farm produces, what the business earns, and so on, you don't really care whether the stock market's open. You can do that on a private basis. In fact, you do it on a private basis if you buy a farm or apartment house generally. And it's a perfectly satisfactory investment. You look at the investment itself to deliver the return to you. Now, if you buy something like Bitcoin or some cryptocurrency, you don't have anything that's producing. You're just hoping the next guy pays more. And you only feel you'll find the next guy to pay more if he thinks he's going to find somebody that's going to pay more. Now, if you ban trading in farms, you could still buy farms and have a perfectly decent investment. If you ban trading in apartment houses or even in equities, if you ban trading in Berkshire Hathaway for the next 5 years, our investors would do fine, over time. But if you ban trading in tulip bulbs, or if you ban trading in some Bitcoin, which nobody knows exactly what it is, people would say, well, why in the world would I buy it? And you aren't investing when you do that. You're speculating. There's nothing wrong with it. If you want to gamble, somebody else will come along and pay you more money tomorrow. That's one kind of game. That is not investing.
There are reportedly a number of these whales, buyers that themselves own a huge portion of Bitcoin. In fact, it's been reported that something like 1,000 individuals own 40% of all Bitcoin. And that is alarming. That means that if one of those people were to unload all their coins at once, it could move the market. But why would they want to do that? Hypothetically, they should want the price to go up. Day to day, when Bitcoin's price is moving, usually it's due to a larger portion of the market and sentiment and maybe news headlines. It's not mostly due to the actions of these whales.
Wow, it certainly has some.
But a lot of people think it would be safer to move those coins off Coinbase into cold storage. And the term cold storage refers to keeping the access keys to your Bitcoin somewhere cold, that is, not accessible to the internet. One form of cold storage would be moving your coins to a hardware wallet. These hardware wallets are basically fobs for Coinbase, and those fees vary and can get very high. There's a large amount of government regulation of Bitcoin. It's not as regulated, obviously, as the US dollar or as US equities, stocks, but there are some forms of regulation that have already started happening. CME and CBOE have launched Bitcoin futures trading, and that is approved and regulated by the CFTC, the Commodities and Futures Bureau. And in addition, Coinbase and other websites that allow you to buy Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies, so brokerages, are FDIC insured to a certain point, and they are regulated by the CFTC. Most people do wonder, is the government going to jump into regulating Bitcoin and regulating ICOs, initial coin offerings, even more so than it has so far? And that's likely coming down the road. Transfer them off Coinbase to your hardware wallet, you're going to have to pay a network fee, and that includes a commission for Coinbase, and those fees vary and can get very high.
Bitcoin itself doesn't generate revenue. Now, you can make money as it fluctuates in value against other currencies and cryptocurrencies. Now, if you're a miner processing the transactions and performing all the difficult mathematical computations that build the blockchain, if you are the first to process a block, you get awarded Bitcoin as a reward. And that is currently 12.5 Bitcoins for every block that is completed, processed, and one of those is completed every 10 minutes.
Probably for the average consumer, there's no reason to use Bitcoin to buy things. Right now, it's just being used as a speculative investment to buy and hold and hope that the price goes up. But if you're doing something for which you'd prefer to be mostly anonymous, then Bitcoin would be valuable. Yes, that would include something like buying drugs or, unfortunately, buying weapons. Terrorist groups have used Bitcoin in the past, hackers for ransom, but also positive things, like there are some cases where you might want to give an anonymous charitable donation. And so Bitcoin is often used for charitable donations.
It's unlikely that you would want to use a cryptocurrency like Bitcoin instead of a credit card, but it is conceivable if a merchant gave you a discount. And the reason they might do that is because taking a credit card has a high chargeback cost if they're taking it over the internet and based in a developing country, for instance. So in very limited cases, you might see that, but for the most part, you'll be choosing to swipe your credit card.
Bitcoin, the digital asset, runs on the Bitcoin blockchain, which is a decentralized, immutable ledger. So I describe the Bitcoin blockchain as a library card in the cloud. Every single transaction done in Bitcoins gets recorded on the Bitcoin blockchain.
This is one of the things that's misunderstood about Bitcoin. People think it does not exist as if it's just vapor or something made up or something imaginary. Bitcoin does exist. It is software. It's a chain of algorithms. If you think of Bitcoin as software, then it's easy to understand that it is actually a thing that exists and helps things take place because of that software.
Plenty of things that exist in the monetary world don't have actual physical value. contracts for, derivatives and futures contracts. Those don't have any value physically, but they do have value as opportunities and more abstract things. It's pretty common in the financial world to have things like this, and certainly not unique to Bitcoin. You could also say even money that's not directly tied to gold or physical assets is similar in this way as well.
Of course, there is a value to Bitcoin other than the scammy black market type of negative headlines and associations that you've seen. It's not just about using Bitcoin on the black market or for sites like Silk Road, which got shut down. There are many places where you can use Bitcoin that are above board and not at all dark and shady. For example, Overstock.com accepts Bitcoin as payment. A number of other online sites accept Bitcoin. It isn't that widespread yet, but the value as an investment is like any other commodity. The value of Bitcoin is all about perception and sentiment. So when Bitcoin is going up, generally two things are happening. Perhaps, or probably, there has been recent good news about Bitcoin or the technology. Maybe some big company or entity using it or announcing they want to use it. And number two, more people feeling more positive about Bitcoin in general. It behaves that way. It's about sentiment and about attitude. So the value of Bitcoin is whatever the larger market, that is the buyers, perceive it to be. And it definitely goes beyond negative black market associations.
There is value in blockchain outside of the black market and ransoms, although admittedly the black market has been a big driver of Bitcoin growth over the years. You're seeing more and more businesses accept it as payment, but because of the wild fluctuations in price, it makes it somewhat dangerous for a business to accept Bitcoin as a payment without hedging it, which itself is complicated. So not anytime soon you're probably going to see Bitcoin available for payment at your local 7-Eleven, but there are legitimate uses for it, especially overseas where merchant accounts can cost a lot of money because there's a high chargeback cost associated with it. The nice thing about the blockchain is every transaction is immutable. You cannot reverse it. And that's also the bad thing about the blockchain.
A big part of the perceived value of Bitcoin is that it is a limited supply. That's why a lot of people compare Bitcoin to a commodity. There's a capped supply of 21 million coins. New coins are created when miners upload blocks of transaction data to the blockchain. They get a tiny reward of new Bitcoins for doing the mining. And the amount of reward they get is halved every 4 years, specifically so as to limit this supply, limit the amount of time it takes to hit that supply. As of right now, we're not going to hit the 21 million coins for over 100 years. But I do think a lot of people have asked, well, can't they just raise the supply? What's to stop them from doing that? Well, the idea with Bitcoin, in fact, the whole appeal is that it is decentralized. There's no one central party in charge, no one arbiter or middleman. And so you hope and you believe, and most people involved in Bitcoin insist this is the case, that the Bitcoin community of developers, because Bitcoin is an open software, won't allow that to happen. The cap is the cap. Now, once we hit that cap, again in over 100 years, what's the reward for miners? That's a different question and a thorny one.
There is a theoretical limit of 21 million Bitcoins that will be hit in about the year 2140. However, at that time, all the miners could get together and decide to increase the supply, or they could decide to do that beforehand because it might be in their economic benefit to do so. Once the final Bitcoin has been mined, the only way the miners are going to make any money is through transaction fees.
Circle is one of the oldest Bitcoin companies, launched in 2013, but the company has evolved its strategy over time and now has multiple apps and payment services, not just tied to cryptocurrency. And co-founder Sean Neville joins me now to discuss. Hey, Sean.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yeah. So back in February, I had your co-founder in here, Jeremy Allaire, and he said something I thought was interesting. With your new kind of suite of products, you guys are basically competing with a wide range of different fintech companies that we cover often. Coinbase, Robinhood, Venmo, Square, all of those. I guess just start by telling me about that. In what ways do you compete with all these companies? Give us an overview of the different apps that now exist within Circle.
Sure. I mean, I think first of all, we think a lot more about customers than we do specific competitors. But as far as competitors go, I think a lot of us are kicking the shins of the same giants together. And if we think about this as an ecosystem and a new kind of internet for finance, then there need to be multiple players. I don't think anyone is trying to create a new walled garden with what we're working on here. So there's room for a lot of experimentation and collaboration, even though there may be competition in certain areas as well. In terms of our products, we have a consumer payment product, which is what we started with. We always imagined, what would it look like if payments just worked on top of things like blockchain rails or interoperable standards, something like an internet of content, but for money, so that we as consumers could just freely move money easily across borders, across currencies, just as easily as you and I can share a photo. And then that's sort of a beginning financial product that we wanted to parlay into others. And so today we have several others. We have a trading product that's one of the leading liquidity providers in the crypto space. We have Circle Invest, which allows people to dip a toe into investment in these assets, and recently acquired an exchange called Poloniex.
Yeah, let's talk about that acquisition, actually, the Poloniex purchase. Was that the first kind of big Circle acquisition, fair to say?
Well, it wasn't the first acquisition that we've made. It was certainly a large one. I think, Jeremy and I have long been interested in the idea of a token marketplace. What does it mean for capital formation if we have new standards for generating capital for our businesses and causes, and for contributing and investing in different businesses over things like interoperable standards built on blockchain tech. And that kind of leads us into the idea of a token marketplace, and a marketplace for multiple kinds of tokens that serve different functions, and the notion that ultimately anything of value might be tokenized. And an exchange is an early step in that direction, but ultimately we see that kind of an exchange product moving past just day trading and trading in speculative assets and into really an open multi-sided marketplace.
It's interesting making the Poloniex acquisition, and it wasn't your first, as you say. I'm sure you guys are watching. Coinbase has sort of ramped up its M&A, recently appointed its first head of M&A. Can we expect Circle to be making more acquisitions in the near future, do you think, as you grow? I
think, it comes down to people and interesting projects, and a lot of really talented people don't necessarily work for us specifically. So where there are collaborative opportunities that exist, something like that might make sense, in the space. As you mentioned, you've launched this app called Circle Invest, a separate app, and recently you guys added a feature called Buy the Market, which I thought was kind of interesting, as more and more of these exchanges kind of add different coins one by one. It's sort of a way of offering access to a lot at once. Tell me about that, about Buy the Market. Yeah, the Invest product is really aimed at someone who wants to get involved in trading these crypto assets or investing in these crypto assets, but needs somewhat of a guided experience. We provide things like custody, but also really simple way to acquire multiple kinds of tokens. And so Buy the Market is a way for you just in a couple of taps to buy a number of assets. Today, as I'm talking to you, there are 7. Over time, we imagine that would grow, and just a couple of taps allows you to buy in a market-weighted fashion across all of those tokens that the Invest product supports.
Let's talk a little bit about the framing of Circle as a brand. I mean, I mentioned at the beginning, it was sort of born, fair to say, as a Bitcoin company, or at least it was seen in its early days as a Bitcoin-related company, a cryptocurrency company. But now, as you say, you have a lot of these products, and certainly, at least with Circle Pay, you could use that without ever thinking of Bitcoin or without that being your entree to the app. But it does use blockchain on the back end. Do you think of Circle in the cryptocurrency space only? I mean, how do you envision the average customer might think of Circle?
Well, everything that we're doing is based on crypto assets and underlying blockchain technology, but those are really enabling things that are around this idea of interoperable finance. And what does it really mean to have interoperable standards, or an HTTPS of money? What does that mean for contracts that are executed in code rather than just in English as interpreted by courts? What does that allow us to do? And so everything that we do is based on those fundamentals. We never left Bitcoin. We believe in Bitcoin. We're not necessarily Bitcoin maximalists, so it's not necessarily the perfect thing for everything that we're doing, but it's extremely valuable and a core component certainly of what we're executing. And there will be other things too. There will be specific chains that address certain specific use cases. There will be other experiments when it comes to a global virtual machine, like we look at Ethereum today, and we'll be interested in looking at all of those.
There is a hot topic in this space right now that people like to debate, and that is the idea of blockchain versus Bitcoin. I think it kind of was fueled by the fact that there are a lot of big financial companies, mostly banks, that say they want to do test pilots with blockchain tech, but they have no interest in Bitcoin. A CEO like Jamie Dimon will say, oh, Bitcoin is a fraud or a scam, but at the same time, they're testing out blockchain tech. And then on the other hand, just at our recent Crypto Summit in February, we had the CEO of Blockchain, the company Blockchain, basically saying, I think that distinction is moot and that it doesn't really exist. Where do you stand on that? I'll give you another quick recent example. The CEO of Kik, which is a chat app, they recently did an ICO. They raised $100 million in that ICO for a token called KIN. So a successful ICO. And yet now, a few weeks later, he just recently said, you know, blockchain is almost pointless, and a lot of people reacted vehemently to that.
Well, there was a movement, I guess, a year or two ago where everyone was very much into blockchain as an optimization, almost an IT optimization, as if it was some sort of better database. And then last year, things almost swung the other way. Everyone was all about the crypto assets, but hadn't really found a great killer use case for blockchain tech yet. And at Circle, we're certainly long on both. You know, blockchain technology and the idea of shared data that is incontrovertible has uses, particularly when there's varying degrees of trust. So when you need interoperability and there isn't complete trust between the parties that need to interoperate, something like the blockchain pattern can be useful. That doesn't mean it's a silver bullet for everything. The crypto assets are also a key part of that, though. The assets themselves, the definition of tokens is very important to make sure that those shared data and that interoperability is public. So we're particularly interested in public chains, and crypto assets are a key part of that. So that's sort of where we fall. Maybe not crisp, you know, one or the other, but both, with certainly leaning toward the value of smart contracts, which is what tokens are, and crypto assets.
You mentioned the idea of a killer use case for Bitcoin. People still talk about that. If you look 5 years down the road, where do you see the space headed? Especially, you know, the idea of blockchain or Bitcoin, or maybe they play together nicely universally. Do you think that banks create their own tokens soon enough? I mean, what do you see, I guess, as maybe the biggest new thing that might happen 5 years from now?
Well, so far today, there have been a couple of use cases that have been pretty successful, whether you want to call them killer or not. Digital gold is a real thing. Bitcoin has been successful as digital gold. And new forms of capital formation, although it's nascent, there's much more to go. You can kind of see with the beginning of things like token offerings how you might encode things like a Series A, Series B, and so forth. Fundraising, according, you know, as consensus dictates that milestones were met, and that will grow increasingly sophisticated. That also leads to really interesting things with tokens, where today we talk about, do they have utility value or are they a security? Are they consumable? Are they collectible? And the truth is, I think we're kind of coming to understand that a lot of tokens are all of those things at different times, potentially, and it's a little more of a spectrum. It's not a clean classification, and that has a lot of different implications. I think over time we'll come to grapple with those, and it'll be a little less square peg round hole. And when it comes to classifying these and knowing how do you list a thing that is a security or an investment token, that's a thing that should be possible, even though it may also be consumable.
We're speaking right now at our Yahoo Finance Crypto Summit. That's where this video will be played. Is there anything you would say to the audience in terms of the biggest misconception right now, or you think something a lot of people are getting wrong about the space? Personally, I'm thinking of sort of the ICO explosion, anything along those lines?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that is really important going forward is how we as a community come to some decisions when it comes to governance. And that doesn't mean that we all need to get in the same camp and come to the same agreement, but we need to come to the same agreement about the protocols that allow us to disagree, whether they're in separate tokens or separate chains, and allow them to interoperate. We need a single protocol or a single mechanism for us all to agree to disagree and then move forward with developing the standard or the set of standards that we're all trying to build on top of, so that we can build those really interesting, you know, distributed applications and those more sophisticated financial products, and be reasonably confident in a high throughput, well-governed, stable base layer when it comes to all of this stuff that we're doing.
All right, Sean Neville, thanks.